So there was a patent that came out from Nintendo that could indicate how the controller in Nintendo's next hardware may function. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I will add a caveat here that all kinds of things get patented but never actually get into production, so this may just be something Nintendo's designed that we never see. And you can see the top of the patent here, and this is from Nintendo in Kyoto, Japan. So this is from Nintendo, and the publication date was just a few days ago on September 7th. And as you can see here, there's a whole lot of figures in this patent, and I'm not going to go through all of these because I kind of get lost in some of this, but what I wanted to focus on was some of the scenarios about this patent. I think this gives us a much better idea of what this actually does. Now, I've seen some initial reports about this patent indicating that this is going to be something like a Hall effect joystick. Now, if you don't know what that is, it basically just uses magnets to kind of induce a current to basically read the joystick's movements, and because there's no physical touching parts, you don't run into things like Joy-Con drift. However, I don't think this is what this patent is actually about. I think there's some confusion there when it talks about magnetic forces and a liquid. Now, there's two big words in this patent. One is viscosity, which you may already be familiar with. And all viscosity is basically a measurement of a fluid's resistance to flow. So if you think of water, it's going to have a lower viscosity than, say, honey. And when something has a higher viscosity, it's going to provide more resistance to something moving through it. Imagine trying to walk through a pool full of water versus a pool full of honey. You're going to have a lot more resistance trying to get through there with that higher viscosity. The next big word here is magnetorheological, and this is a new one for me, so I had to do a little bit of research on this. And basically what this means is when a fluid is subject to a magnetic field, its viscosity increases. So the more of a magnetic field it receives, the basically thicker or more viscous it becomes, providing more resistance. Now, the patent provides several different scenarios as to what the patent does. And for the sake of time, I'm going to skip through some of the background information that builds up to the scenario, but you can read all this in the patent if you want. There's a link in the description below. So let's look here at the example they give. One configuration example is an information processing system including a controller including an operation element configured to be displaced from an initial position by user's operation. So I believe they're talking about basically the thumbstick here. It can be displaced by the user. And then it says a restoring force imparting section configured to apply a restoring force for returning a position of the displaced operation element to the initial position. So basically this restoring force is a black box somewhere. We don't know what this is, but it's something that'll basically pull that thumbstick back to center. And this next part I think is key. A resistance section using a magnetorheological fluid whose viscosity changes in accordance with an intensity of a magnetic field and which serves as a resistance when the operation element, the thumbstick, is displaced from the initial position and to the initial position, and a magnetic field generation section configured to provide the magnetic field to the magnetorheological fluid. So I'm going to pause there. So basically the magnetic field they're talking about here is what's going to be applied to the fluid to make it more viscous. And then it closes out with, and a circuit capable of controlling the magnetic field generation section. So again, the magnetic field here is being generated by some type of circuit. The circuit is configured to control the intensity of the magnetic field generated by the magnetic field generation section And here's the key: so that the viscosity of the magnetorheological fluid periodically changes at least between a first viscosity state and a second viscosity state in which the viscosity is lower than in the first viscosity state. So we basically have just two states here, a high and a low, and has such a value that the operation element returns to the initial position by the restoring force. So it sounds like there's only two different viscosity states in this. You've got one that's a higher value, that it sounds like if you let go of the thumbstick, it would prevent the stick from coming back because it provides more resistance than that restoring force can push the stick back over. So as we read through that, there was nothing there indicating that this system is going to read a thumbstick's position, which is what something like a Hall effect sensor would do. Now, I said I wasn't going to go through a whole lot of graphs here, but I did want to show this one here that shows those two different power states. And you can see at the lower part of the wave, you can see a low viscosity state, and then at the higher one would be the higher viscosity state. So basically in this graph, your P3 section's your higher magnetic field with a high viscosity state, and then just after that is the lower magnetic field with a low viscosity state. Now, because this is a digital system, there's a possibility that they could basically switch this on and off very quickly so that you have a sort of varying viscosity. So let's say it's cycling on and off 100 times between that high and low in a second. That would feel like a lower viscosity than if it was basically applied at the high state the whole time. And this patent has over 150 different scenarios, so I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll kind of give you a summary of what I read through. One example they talk about is setting that viscosity so high that the analog stick doesn't return to center, so it just kind of stays to whatever position it was in. They also talk about how they could have some sort of presets for different viscosities, or you can pretty much design your own without having to develop your own as a developer. And this one section here I want to read to you and kind of explain my interpretation of it. And I'm skipping down here a bit. It says, in addition, the information processing system may further include an operation position acquisition section configured to acquire a position of the operation element. Now, the operation element basically is the thumbstick. But note here, though, that it says that it could include an operation position acquisition section. So I don't see this as saying that this magnetic fluid system is going to read the position. It's just that they're saying you can add in a system that does that. And that's the way patents are. They've got to list out every little scenario that could be used with this so that someone else doesn't invent something that basically is the same thing but used for a different purpose. And this point here kind of confirms my thought about adjustable viscosity. The amplitude, the frequency, and the application time of the current to be applied to the magnetic field generation section are controlled to change the viscosity of the magnetorheological fluid. Thus, it is possible to control the viscosity change by comparatively simple parameter designation. So basically what I feel this patent is about is some sort of force feedback mechanism. So basically something where you can feel a resistance in the analog stick. Now, not something that's going to move the stick like you would think of a force feedback like in a steering wheel. But think about those adaptive triggers in the PlayStation 5. This sounds like some type of similar result for your analog stick. But let me know what you think. Again, the link to this patent is in the description below. Do you think I have my analysis of this completely wrong? And yes, this is definitely some type of Hall effect related patent. Or after looking through all the different scenarios here, does it look more like it's just something that's going to provide some type of variable resistance to your analog stick's motion? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed yet, consider doing so. It really does help the channel out quite a bit. I want to thank you for watching and be good.